Hello and welcome to Coop's Corner. I'm your host, Cooper Petagna, and we have an absolutely jam-packed LSU episode as Brian Kelly is out at LSU after 3.5 years, 34-14, 5-3 this season, 5-11 against ranked opponents, 29-3 against unranked opponents, and an absolute shellacking against Texas A&M in Death Valley. And to join us to break it all down is Blake Ruffino from AYS Sports. Are You Serious Sports Network? You can find him at AYS Sports on X, also at Blake Ruffino. Blake, I love your work, man. I love your energy. I love the way you talk LSU football. You're one of the best in the business. I couldn't wait to get you on. Crazy 24 hours, man. Where do we even start?
Well, first off, thank you for those kind words. You know, it's funny, Could you come in the business and you do this from an individual basis, and then now I get to talk to you. Like that's a very, very wild, surreal thing sometimes, but I really appreciate that. And yes, we will try to bring the energy today, but it has been a wild 24 hours, to be honest with you. I did not think if you would have asked me, actually, literally was on a post game. If you would have asked me 48 hours ago, I didn't think it would get here. I pretty much had came to the conclusion and ran it on our show on Saturday night after A&M embarrassed us. I say us like I'm LSU, but A&M embarrassed LSU, that Joe Sloan was gone. And Coop, when things got really shady and hairy there in a meeting yesterday morning with Brian Kelly and the administration, I think shit got real, and excuse me for my language, but stuff got real, and it got to a point of no return. And I don't think Brian Kelly had the capital that he thought he had, because he never thought that they would stroke a $50 million check to get him out of there. And they did. And I think that all of this encompasses what has happened. I think that, Coop, I said this the other night. I think the final drive before half encompassed the entire 3.5 years of Brian Kelly, ironically, and how things played out on the field. So I am a little shocked. I am a little kind of taken back by all of this, because I just didn't think it would happen. But here we are.
Tell me a little bit about what you know about that meeting, because there's been some speculation, and obviously we're putting the pieces together, from the media side of it. You just kind of pick up little things about what you hear. But from what I understood, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like there was a meeting with Scott Woodward, with Brian Kelly, with maybe some other individuals in high-ranking positions at LSU. And the conversation essentially went by Scott Woodward saying, hey, we're going to let go of Joe Sloan. And that's where BK responded with, well, I'd like to let go of our offensive line coach as well. And then from there, it just kind of snowballed. Does that sound right?
That's about right. I can't confirm who was in the meeting other than Brian Kelly, Scott Woodward, and potentially Austin Thomas, the GM. But that is correct. What I was told. So just to give you a timeline of what happened yesterday from my vantage point, I was around 9:30. I tweeted this out. Hey guys, today's about to get very, very interesting. And everybody's like, oh, Joe Sloan's fired. And I just fire back, yes, but not right now. And so from the way that I gather it is that Brian Kelly was not going to be in the building, and he was taking maybe a day off that maybe he shouldn't. And they were trying to figure out what they need to do moving forward. They try to tell him that you're going to make moves. He said, I'm the sitting head coach. I'm not making all of these moves. I want X, Y, and Z. We can't do that. And basically they said, yeah, you are. And they got into I don't know if I can say this, but it got into a wee-wee matchup, and so, well, LSU won and Brian Kelly was out. But I was told a couple of things here, that number one, it got so toxic that it got to a point of no return. And that basically, without the sitting president, that the governor and the board of supervisors had to get involved here. Now, what I would tell you is, I do think that this was already in motion. The way that I understand it is that they had already had discussions about this potentially happening. And because everything blew up, they just went ahead and pulled the Band-Aid off. Because, Coop, what I was gathering is that there was not going to be NIL funds. People weren't going to invest into this. So either you move on now and know that this isn't going to work, or you don't. But basically, that meeting that happened yesterday morning around 9:30, and when it started, things just got really bad. And then they got Frank Wilson involved in saying, hey, You're probably going to be taking over this, the interim head coach, and Frank's an LSU guy. So I think that's look, the advocate, I thought the advocate story that was out, or not the advocate, excuse me, the athletic story that was out there. Forgive me for not knowing who wrote it. I read it this morning, and Coop, I would say it's pretty accurate. Some of the finite details I don't know to be completely accurate, but pretty much in a nutshell was pretty spot on.
All right, so from your vantage point, you consume a lot of LSU football. I mean, it's your life, right? So
Yep.
when they hire Brian Kelly to where we are now, to where he's out of the building, where in your mind did you start to see the cracks in the dam maybe at some point this season that has led us to this point?
Yeah, so when he first got here on paper, and I think we all were like this, was hey, we had a guy who ate grass, a guy who ate crawfish, and we couldn't understand. And I love Ed Orgeron. And then he comes here, and okay, this is going to work. But where I started seeing cracks in the dam was mainly due to the fact it happened. It started happening around the Colin Simmons recruitment.
Mm.
And when LSU basically didn't do the things that they needed to do to get that kid from a financial standpoint, and they couldn't get there, and there was not alignment, that's when I first realized that there was a crack in that dam. Now, I did, and me and my team went to Dallas, Texas. There was a receiver in Dallas, Texas, in Duncanville, where DK Moore committed on our show. Okay. And so when he committed on AYS, I was like, this is awesome. And then through that process, a lot of the same things started happening. So that would be about the time where I was like, okay, well, they're meddling a little too much. And to Brian Kelly's defense, Coop, they meddled a lot with him. They did things that I don't think that they should have done and that they should have allowed a head coach to handle, even if he was or wasn't handling those things. So I think about the DK Moore commitment and when he flipped to Oregon was about the time that I was like, hey man, this might have gotten to a point of no return. Now let me get to this. When Alston Thomas was hired, I did start getting a little bit more hope, the general manager, because I was like, listen, okay, so now we're going to get in the avenue of like, hey, we're going to be competitive here in some of these situations. And recruiting is the lifeblood that fuels the dreams of champions. The great and late, and a guy that I hold dear, Kurt Hester, used to talk about that all the time. And you just weren't doing it. And I know that me and you've had a kind of off-base conversation about like Carius Kern. And so when those things didn't happen and you weren't getting those guys, that's when I saw the crack in the dam. And then I think the final straw was for me to some extent is when they basically made him hire Blake Baker. It's kind of like, okay, well, there's too many chefs in the kitchen here. And I love Blake Baker, and it was the right decision. And I'm not saying it's not, but there were so many different things that weren't aligned that I was like, man, this is about to get bad.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Scott Woodward. I worked at Washington with Chris Peterson. Scott Woodward hired Chris Peterson. I was
Right.
not there at the same time. Scott Woodward made his way to Texas A&M, but I've been around people that have worked for a Scott Woodward administration under a football ops building. He's in there every day. He
Every
lives, he breathes it. He loves recruiting. He's taking a look at the board. Knowing what I know, it's probably pretty safe to make the assumption that Scott Woodward probably knew the recruiting board a lot better than Brian Kelly did.
I
You
would
can make
agree.
that assumption at Notre Dame. You could probably make it at LSU. I just find the whole thing fascinating from the relationship from Scott Woodward, which I think part of this is necessary to when they hire Brian Kelly, the staff that he brought in. He brings in Mike Denbrock, his trusted confidant from Notre Dame. He brings in Matt House. We'll get to that in a second. He brings in Brian Polian, Kerry Cooks, Steeples, Jamar Kane after 1 year. So you had a revolving door at defensive line, one of the most important positions in the program. Your defensive coordinator's out after 2 years. And then DBU, here's the other thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. Blake Baker, and it would have been quite a jump for Brian Kelly to come in and say, you know what, we got a great guy on staff. I'm going to make Blake Baker the DC. It wouldn't have been a crazy jump to keep him on staff. Same with Corey Raymond, right? And
Right.
I understand when coaches want their new guys in there and the way that it goes. I think what happened was the first 2 years, they gave him the autonomy that you would give a $100 million coach to let him make those decisions. He didn't make the right ones. Scott Woodward saw this and came in and said, all right, we got to course correct here. I'm going to bring in Austin Thomas from Ole Miss to make sure that we're aligned from an NIL standpoint. I'm going to make sure that we get the right defensive coordinator. And these are really my hires as we go forward. So when you talk about that, pissing contest between Scott Woodward and Brian Kelly, to me, it feels like it's a lot of built up residual. And then just in football in general, there's politics, right? The Joe Sloan, Mike Denbrock thing. Like, I don't know how much of that is true. Denbrock goes to Notre Dame because he's upset after having a Heisman winning trophy quarterback that, somebody wants part of those seats out of. I don't blame him. I've been at other places where that's happened before, but it's up to the head coach making $100 million to put your foot down and say, hey, listen, you're not there yet. And if you want to go somewhere else, be my guest. But there is a lot of nuance to this entire situation.
Yeah, I think you illustrated it's not that simple. And listen, I'm going to get killed for saying this. The man had 30 scholarship players in year one, and you had some residuals like Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. You had Will Campbell, which, by the way, the first person that Brian Kelly went to go see in recruiting was Will Campbell, right? Like, it was the first player that he went to go see. And so he's a part of bringing in Jaden Daniels. And I don't know if it was completely fair to Brian Kelly for the situation that happened with Matt House. 2 years, you should be better than what you were, without a doubt. I'm not saying you shouldn't have been. But at the same time, I do think that there was a little bit of, like, they went out and got Denver Harris. Well, that backfired in their face. They went out and got some of these guys in the portal, and it completely backfired in their face, and they couldn't overcome that. And you're right. He could when they started meddling, BK stopped caring in a way. And so that's how I feel like that. And I say level of care, like, all right, man, well, you're going to do it anyway. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. And then finally, going and fast forward into yesterday, Brian Kelly finally stands up and says, you're not doing that. And it got him fired. And I think the whole Joe Sloan situation, Joe Sloan was not really well liked in that building. I know that for a fact. And when Brian Kelly held on to him and the whole Denbrock thing did go, it started causing massive dissension. And the separation on offense caused a lot of tension, and Brian Kelly didn't get in front of that tension. And so I don't think, and here's the thing, I don't think the culture from the players were bad. Coop, they were up 18-14 versus A&M. Like, you don't
I think they were surprised about that.
Right, I really do. But here's the thing. It's not that they weren't trying. It's not that they don't care. But coaching got in the way. But at the bottom line is that, look, he kept his, with all due respect to him, to Sloan and Garrett Nussmeier, he put his chips in with them. He refused to let them go. And they were forcing him to make Joe Sloan be fired yesterday. And, well, both of them are got on the chopping block.
Are you surprised Brad Davis, from what we know, was the tipping point?
No, because here's the thing that nobody wants to talk about. And Coop, we're going to talk about like this on our show this week when we actually are able to get to games, okay, which we can't get to games now. But here's the interesting thing. LSU the last 3 weeks is running the ball for 6 yards a carry over the last 3 weeks, whether it be Vandy, South Carolina, and now Texas A&M. I think that they knew that they were going to struggle, but there were some things. Now, the protection of Garrett Nussmeier is god-awful. And I'm not surprised that it was the tipping point. I think Brian Kelly was saying, hey, we're getting better there. But I am surprised that he got to a place where he refused not to do it to get him fired, though. Like, I get to a place where I'm like, okay, I can see him wanting to hold on to Brad Davis. I can't get to a place to where it gets him fired that it would go that far. No. So I am surprised.
All right, so I want to clarify real quick. So it was BK that wanted to hold on to Brad Davis and not Woodward.
From what I understand, yes. From what I understand, it was a Brian Kelly like, hey, I'll give you Joe Sloan, but I'm not giving you Brad Davis. And people thought it was the other way around, but it wasn't. And I think he was going to give Sloan up, and he did give Sloan up. But the Brad Davis thing was the one that I was told was like, look, man, I get it, but things only get worse if you let him go right now. And I don't necessarily disagree with BK on that. But see, here's the thing: that I think BK was asked to take over the offensive line when they did make that move, and he said no because he didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't want to put the work in to salvage a program on an issue that's a massive issue in protection. I mean, they got Carrier's current left tackle, Coop. I mean, I mean, like it's gotten that bad. So, and when Frank Wilson took over in the interim, I think Frank was able to convince them to keep him until they started making different decisions here. But it was the tipping point.
All right, I want to take a step back. I want to kind of, in your eyes, do a little bit of an autopsy from a win-loss standpoint and kind of go through 22 to 25 and where we are now. And I have all these losses written out, and I got a couple of these where I'm just like, these are just non-starters for LSU fans, right? Florida State. If you look at Florida State, the first game you ever coached is kind of an embodiment of where we are, right? It's like this talented roster. You roll them out. You expect to win the game. You're down and out for 3.5 quarters. You make a run late, and then you miss an extra point.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to somebody that worked on the staff over the last couple of years, not there anymore, but he's like, we just never felt prepared. You know, it was never a 3-phase team. We never felt connected. Tennessee comes in later that year, very good team, and whoops you, 40-13 at home in Death Valley. And then A&M on the road when you still have a chance as an outside shot to make the playoffs, you lose by 15 points to a team that wasn't very good. So that was 22, right? And to your point, we should give credit to the fact that he took this team to an SEC championship that was absolutely depleted when he took it over. All right, 23, they go 10-3. Once again, non-conference game, opponent, neutral field, something that LSU prides themselves in. Rich history for the people on the outside that don't know much about LSU football. They lose that game, big time, by 21 points. They lose to Ole Miss in a game that they should have won on the road in a shootout with Jaden Daniels, give up 55 points, and then they go on the road and lose to Alabama. Jaden Daniels gets hurt in that game, and that one was history. All right, and then the reoccurring theme here, next year, USC. Talking a lot in the offseason, you lose that game to start the year. A&M, Marcel Reed comes in, you have no plan for him. Bama, completely outclassed, the closest thing to what we saw against Texas A&M this past weekend. And then Florida, freshman quarterback Billy Napier fighting for his life. They get you at home. So everybody knows this year, Ole Miss, Vandy, A&M, these were reoccurring themes to me. The same game with different opponents.
Yeah, I mean, you're 1,000% right. You know, I look at 23 as an example. If you would have lost to them by 3 when they went undefeated, that's one thing. You know what I mean, Coop? Like, if you lose to a team that probably should have made the playoff, that's one thing. You're getting blown out in all these high-profile games. And that's the part where I think LSU, Louisiana people, and they all know this, we all know this, is that it's one thing to lose, it's another thing to get embarrassed. And that's the part, is every time that you have one of these big situations, outside of Bama in 22, you couldn't overcome. And you asked Jaden Daniels to do so much for you that he couldn't overcome the horrible defense. Coop, if they got a stop in 23 on one drive against Alabama, even though he got knocked out, one drive versus Ole Miss, they might be a 10-2 team. Maybe. Very, very well could have been. But it got to a point where LSU started getting embarrassed. The USC loss was unforgivable. And I think that that's really where the start of all of this happened, is how unforgivable it was. I do know from inside that building, there was a lot of pressure on Brian Kelly to win game 1 this year versus Clemson, and they put all of their chips in because of what had been happening. And that's why he did what he did about week 1 versus Clemson. But you go into Vanderbilt when, look, I know Clark Lee's doing a good job, but let's be honest. There's no reason you should lose to Vanderbilt the way that you lost to them. I know it's a 7-point game, but they pretty much dominated you in a lot of aspects. There's no reason that Ole Miss should be able to physically impose their will in the trenches on you, home or away. And that was the part where Brian Kelly just never could overcome, and the level of physicality was down. You know, Urban Meyer says this a lot. When we got off the bus and we faced LSU, we were like, God, brother, we in for a war tonight. They might not be good, bad, or indifferent. We're in for a war. Look at the dudes that they have on that sideline. And I don't think the mentality they were able to overcome it, and being embarrassed. And then listen, I've said this a couple of times now. I'll say it here with you. You know as well as I do. It would have been one thing if Bama would have walked off in here last Saturday and embarrassed us. It's a completely different deal that A&M ran everybody out of the stadium and did what they did. The SEC did one thing really well. They forced us to be a rival with them, and it worked because we don't like them and they don't like us. They walked us off. And that was the point where I think it was a point of no return. And listen, it's not the losing. I think everybody looks at LSU goes, oh, well, it was championship or bust. You're right. It was also just being flat out embarrassed. And that's what ultimately LSU fans were like, we're not going to deal with.
Yeah, it's not losing, it's how you lose. If you
It's
were to
how you
look at a win-loss column and say, "Oh, they fired a coach that had this record, that fired a coach that was 23-2 at home," it's like, I trust me, I understand that argument, but when you have Tiger Stadium emptied out midway through the third quarter on a Saturday night where the expectation is to win and to defend the sanctuary, and like you said, there's not there's a lot of love lost between those two fan bases to have the only people in the stadium be Aggies fans in the fourth quarter. I can tell you that thing in terms of expediting this process of Brian Kelly being relieved of his job was probably happening as the game was going on. I think I read that as well, you know,
yeah.
amongst power brokers and in the suites there in Death Valley. I want to ask you just in terms of what you expected and in terms of what LSU got with Brian Kelly, what was maybe your biggest disappointment in terms of, hey, perception from reality? I thought that we were going to get a really good offensive line like the ones that we saw at Notre Dame, and we didn't get it. Was there one thing that kind of stuck out to you?
That one and the lack of organization. I thought when Brian Kelly got hired that the one thing that I would never have to worry about was organization, and then him not getting his way, so to speak. Like, I knew that there was a lot of conversations about him from Notre Dame people in reference to, oh, well, he doesn't put in the work here, he doesn't put in the work there. And I'm like, okay, well, he surrounded himself with guys like Frank Wilson, and they're never like, I get that maybe the recruiting will be what it is to some extent. I was blown away, Coop. Look, they gave us practices. I went to all 17 practices that they gave us. Some of them were full practices. I'll be real with you. I said it during the preseason. I'm blown away by some of the disorganization on some of this. And so that was the part of, like, I thought Brian Kelly coming in here, the organization of how things were run would be better. And that was what blew me away, to be honest with you. I didn't think it would go that way.
It's crazy. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's easy to throw dirt on a guy that's 6 feet under right now, but it's funny how much more people are willing to talk now that he is gone. And then most of the feedback that you get was, we don't really know what he did, right? He had his own process, but he was kind of separate from everybody else. Also, he didn't help out with the game planning. He didn't help out with recruiting, and he didn't help out with fundraising. And to your point that you made earlier, once you let the AD get involved as he's involved, it's over. You know,
It's over.
you're riding that ship, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, which leads me to my next point. Scott Woodward is responsible for giving out two of the worst contracts in college football history between Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M and LSU at Brian Kelly, which I believe surpasses over $120 million in buyout money.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big number there. Do you believe he should be given the responsibility to make the next hire?
No, and I don't. I look. I'm not a source guy. I try to be more of an opinion guy. I'll just tell you what I heard. He ain't going to. And Coop, I would be shocked if you don't get a new president in here in early November and he's not fired. I would really be shocked here. I think because this thing has gotten political, even if you think that Scott has done a great job, which, listen, the football hire is a big one, and you got to get it right. Scott hadn't done a bad job. Like, let me give an example. I know that we talk mainly college football here. I get it, but Louisiana's a different beast with LSU for baseball. He ain't involved in baseball. I mean, he ain't involved because Jay Johnson raises the money. He recruits at a high level, back-to-back #1 recruiting classes. Let's go, Jay Johnson. By the way, got another 5-star commit this past weekend, even though LSU got embarrassed at A&M. That's the part where I'm saying, like, he didn't I felt like he did a good job with Mulkey, even though people don't want to give him credit for that. He did an elite job, literally, with Jay Johnson. He didn't do a great job with Matt McMahon. And as crazy as this is about to sound, when people were pushing for him, when people wanted Matt McMahon out, Will Wade going to NC State was not a very favorable thing for him. And so I don't think that he's going to be able to make the hire because of how political this thing has gotten. I don't think him and the sitting governor are aligned politically, and that is going to get him clipped, whether you agree with what he's done or what he's not done. But Coop, you can't have $130 million worth of buyout money and keep your job, regardless. It can't happen. So that's where it's going to go here.
I agree. What's interesting to your point is LSU is a behemoth from the baseball standpoint, and
No doubt.
they got a national championship. They got one in women's basketball. Maybe that doesn't move the needle as much. The basketball hires have obviously been frustrating, but it's kind of like his philosophy on coaching hires is feast or famine, and then LSU financially, I understand, is in some trouble. When he left Washington was in some trouble. A&M wasn't in a position to go out and get the next guy, which kind of brings me to my point. Will LSU be in a position now, in a comparable one that the Aggies were in just a few years ago, to where they say, hey, it would be fiscally irresponsible for us to go pay Lane Kiffin $13.5, $14 million a year, given what just shaked out here? Do we have to go a different route? And it's almost kind of like it's a blessing in disguise, because I'm not saying the BK hire was lazy, but it was kind of like, let me just go grab the shiny toy off the shelf instead of really kind of doing my homework, going out there, being deliberate, trying to find the guy that best fits the program, and really asking yourself, what are the traits that we value and covet?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, when A&M hired Elko, it wasn't the sexiest thing in the world, but it was the right move. I said that before they hired him, because he was anti what Jimbo Fisher had made that program become. And you look at LSU and it's just lack of stability, lack of cohesive vision, can't get everybody on the same page. But the thing that I'm worried about the most is if you pull Woodward out, which I'm not defending him, there's plenty of reasons why you should. Now you got a governor involved. You have probably a Austin Thomas involved to some extent.
Yep.
You don't really know who's making the decision, and you don't really know what they're trying to accomplish when they're doing it. I have a feeling, because the way that college football has changed, if you can't get Kiffin and you can't get Eli Drinkwitz, with both of those guys are motivated, have good motivation to stay right where they are, LSU's going to be in foreign territory where whoever they decide to pick ain't going to be good enough, and they're going to have to pick a guy that they say, okay, we can grow, we can develop, and we can somewhat sell this guy. But given the nature of the job, it's going to be a little bit of a roll of the dice.
Coop, you nailed it on the head here. I'm terrified behind this in a way, because you're not going to have an AD that can make decisions. You don't have a president, even though I think it's going to happen soon, in which a lot of political alignment has got to be here. And look, people don't agree on politics. What is one thing that your grandmammy says, don't say at the dinner table at Thanksgiving? Don't talk politics. Don't talk politics with Uncle John. Well, in this conversation, don't talk about it with Uncle Bo, and it's spelled with an EAUX. And you get to a situation here where it gets to a place that you're going to have to convince a Lane Kiffin or Eli Drinkwitz or whoever it is, regardless of who it is, that you have alignment. And that's the part that terrifies me. Like I think of, like as an example, John Summerall's name has come up a lot in these hot board conversations. Brother, you can mark that, in my opinion, you can mark John Summerall completely through and say that ain't happening because this thing has gotten so political. I don't see a sitting governor who's got the power to do this, to go to an in-state school with an upcoming election year, to go get a guy in the state of Louisiana from one school and bring him to LSU. That's political suicide, in my opinion. So then then John Summerall's off. Does Alex Golish really think that LSU is the job with the non-alignment? There are coaches out there that will and would take this job. But at the same time, I fear for everything that LSU is going on that you don't have the alignment and that you not having a sitting AD is a problem. Now, Coop, he has left, meaning Woodward, a lot of institutions and a lot of bad money situations. And so that's not even an opinion. That is just literally a fact at this point. And now LSU is there. But I do think one thing is a little bit interesting here. I do think, from what I've been told, that a lot of really wealthy human beings have gotten involved here because the governor is now involved, and they are going to go for broke whether we like it or we don't like it. I'm not saying that I am not saying that that will happen. They're trying to. I don't know what's going to happen, but it just comes to a point in time where I have absolutely no clue. And I'm okay with saying I have absolutely no clue of what's going to happen, but the number one thing is, it's like anybody who's just a normal human being. If you go, are you going to get hired by a company and go get hired by a company that the top has no alignment in it? It makes no sense. No matter how good that business is, if it's going to be very bad, why would you do that? And I think that Lane Kiffin and others look at that and say, do we have alignment? But I do think that they're going to try to gear up to try, and I don't know what happens there.
The political piece of this is so fascinating to me because that's where Governor Landry, that's where Scott Woodward, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't understand how that seeps into football decisions. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I know those guys are rubbing elbows a lot. They have to work together a lot. I know those are guys that, probably have to have some type of relationship. But like, if you really want the best interest of the university in the program, then you got to put that stuff to the side. And that's what scares me. Here's the thing. I talked about Scott Woodward being in those buildings, being involved. Like, this is a football guy. He made a decision. It didn't work out. And now you have other guys behind the scenes that I have no idea what their background is. Scott Woodward at least has some skins on the wall, the places that he's been. And from a logic standpoint, I can understand why he took a swing at Brian Kelly. I can understand why he took a swing at Jimbo Fisher. That's part of it, man. The man in the arena, right? These are difficult decisions to make. And although the confidence meter is low with him right now, at least I kind of know that I got somebody with a football mind and a compass that has a reasonable process to go through. And so, you know what? If we can't get Lane Kiffin, I can kind of work through my board and say, hey, here are the things, just like you scout a player, what do we want to miss on? Well, we want to miss on size. We want to miss on speed. We want to miss on athleticism. What do we want to miss on at LSU? We want to miss on a young, dynamic coach that either has an identity on the offense or defensive side of the football that we can align with the front office that we trust, that has showed us that they can go out and operate at a high level. And to me, that's kind of the combination that I think this is going to end up with.
I fully agree with that. And listen, I'm with you. I don't know how we've gotten here where the sitting governor is just like, which, by the way, he forced out the the former president, and William Tate, who, just being blunt, also got involved in a little bit too involved behind the scenes, and he got the axe for it in sports. So I think that's where we sit at the current moment on that. And listen, Coop, I hope that you're right. I hope that that's what they do. I just want a football dude. Right. I want a dude that's going to actually want to be here, because I think LSU in Louisiana is a place for me. If you just put in the time and effort and go out there and recruit at the highest level in the state, which, by the way, you would know this better than I would. You have, 3 or 4 top players in the state for the 2027 class. Okay. And so you have them right here in your state. Well, the number one goal is you can't miss on them. And then I get to a worry where It's just like, hey, you're spending all this money. Are you dried up in recruiting? Like, are you, and we all know how this works. Let's not even, we all know how it works. And so I have a fear in this. As bad as the things had gone down with Brian Kelly, I'm also fearful of what a political guy wants to do with a hire. And that's where I start getting, nervous. Like, I really am nervous. It's like, hey man, the first time that you get a crawfish out of the bowl and you let it sit there, how hot and spicy is this thing going to be? Well, this has gotten way too spicy. This has gotten way too bad. And you got to go get Andy Gator to cool it down. And so are they going to be able to prove to people that they have alignment?
I don't think the national media, national fans have any idea just how
None.
combustible this situation is behind the scenes and how much of a mess that it is. Total clown show, by the way, right? I think that's the best way to describe it. It wouldn't be an LSU coaching search if it wasn't that way.
No doubt.
Which is funny to me. The Saban things, we'll get into coaching candidates. The Saban thing's funny to me because when's the last time that you really, and correct me if I'm wrong, when's the last time you really had stability in the athletic department? Probably not since Skip Bertman.
No, not since Skip, yeah.
You would need a guy like Nick Saban to go and assume a position like athletic director, which is more plausible than him being a head coach at this point in his career, and have enough cachet to tell the governor, the president, whoever it is, I got it. Get away. I got it.
I got to be a little honest with you. You just got a jersey patch on your, the jersey patch thing that they just signed.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing. I have a pretty good idea that that's going to be about $6.5 million, $7.5 million a year. I'm giving that to Nick and say, help us hire the next head coach. And when he
just come retire here, man. We need you.
Yeah, or go for him. Here's the God's honest truth. If you think that they ain't gonna pick up the phone and call that man and say, "Hey, how's ESPN treating you?" They're gonna do it and see if he could get involved. I don't think that would ever happen, but I'm with you. I think that Saban would be somebody who could bring stability to you. By the way, he built the indoor facility and he never saw it until he got to ESPN. I mean, the first time everything that got built and everything that he did, I'm sitting there at practice and Saban walks in, all 5'8" of him, and I'm like, he's like, this is the first time I've been here. We built this. This was getting built when I was coming in or when I was leaving, and I'm like, dude, I do wonder if he ever gets the itch of because he got elected into the Louisiana Louisiana Hall of Fame. And in that, he said one of the biggest regrets is that I regret leaving LSU. And you can't say that here. You know what's going to happen. I mean, all I want from Santa Claus over the next 5 to 10 years is that Nick Saban returns. I will not take another Christmas present if Nick Saban returns. But regardless, you got to ask him, hey, who is the best candidate for the job? And listen, I will tell you this. I would be shocked if there's not a story that comes out within the next week or so that Nick Saban was the one that called Brian Kelly and told him about LSU and what he could do there. And I think that would be the part of hey, you did it when you were still at Bama and the guy was going up against you and, by the way, beat you in 22. Can you do this for us again? I think he would do it.
What's funny about what you just said, I'm glad you brought it up because I wasn't going to hit on it. In theory, I can understand where Brian Kelly and LSU would work. What I don't think that Scott Woodward, Brian Kelly, and anybody else involved in that hire really kind of took into the picture was how much the game would change and how quickly it would change.
Yes, and BK never, sorry to interrupt you, he never evolved to it, ever. He evolved too late. He evolved way too late.
And I think to your point, with everything that happened in the meddling in the program, I think he just said, all right, hands off. That's the way it's going to be. Then I'm essentially going to show up on Saturday and I'm going to try to coach this team to the best of my ability and we'll see what happens. Which, here's my point. I brought it up as we get to the coaching search. I think it's so important in this day and age of college football to have not only critical thinkers, but minds that are open and minds that can evolve. Not, hey, I've been coaching for 35 years. This is the way that I am. Let me teach you a thing or two. No, the game is changing. In which way can we stay ahead of it? And what does that look like? And that's not really an age thing. That's a mentality. That's a
Yes.
psychological advantage, right? And I think the other part of this is that we're going to see a shift in college football hirings from what we've seen of let's go out and get Brian Kelly, let's go out and get James Franklin. If you're going to be a CEO in today's college football, you have to have no blemishes, right? Because your blind spots will sink you. Brian Kelly had
Absolutely.
2 blind spots this year. He underestimated the need at offensive tackle, and then he overestimated the confidence that he had in his play caller. Those
No,
sunk him at the end of the day. And
it's
Scott Woodward and Austin Thomas covered everything else up, and it still wasn't good enough.
what I mean, I hate to do this to you, but bingo.
Yeah.
I mean, bingo. I mean, that's exactly what happened. Listen, this is going to come out because if it didn't come out from somebody else, it's coming out at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on Monday night. Nobody in that building liked what Sloan was about. And I hate to say it like that, and BK let it fester too long. Sorry, but that's the truth. And I don't like doing that. Here's what I hate. I hate going through these situations and listen, it is the truth. Want to know why stuff got really toxic? That is the truth. And so, look, I mean, they moved on from it. Alex Atkins takes over play calling. And listen, I would not be surprised again if people kind of were happy about these moves. Not maybe BK, but I mean, look, I mean, we'll say the players are actively on Twitter saying, thank you, God, when Joe Sloan got fired. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, that's not me saying that, but it is the truth. And so that's where you're at. And to put your 35-year plus career and not wanting to move on from him. And to be honest with you, look, Garrett is who Garrett is. But the truth of the matter is there were people that wanted him to move on from Garrett last year. And they didn't. And then it's going to get him burned here. From the tackle perspective, quarterback and OC, it got him burned.
Yeah, just a side note, I mean, I'm doing NFL draft prep right now, and it's very difficult to even evaluate Garrett Nussmeier.
No,
You know,
I bet it is.
From the pressure, from the play calling to I have no idea how bad the abdominal strain was, at parts of this season. So, all right, I kind of want to put a bow on this thing, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on one. Let's start with if you had to pick 2 traits that you're looking for in the next head coach, what would they be? And then the second part of it is give me 4 or 5 names that you think actually kind of mesh off the top of the dome that you think would be good fits.
Yeah, so number one, let's just get number one out of the way. I don't think John Summerall, whether I like him or not, and I like John Summerall a lot, I don't think he gets the job just because of the politics of this. I could be completely wrong. I don't think in a political system with what's going on that he gets it. We talked about that earlier. I want a guy that is a football dude like him, though. Somebody that I know that's going to go in there and work and try to do everything humanly possible to make that place what it is. One thing that we don't give Ed credit for, less credit for, regardless of what you want to say. I mean, I had multiple friends that were on staff and multiple friends, one that was in my wedding that worked for one of those guys and was a GA for the other. And they were like, listen, we might not like them, but they worked hard. And let's never miss a recruiting meeting, ever. Ed never missed a recruiting meeting. Ed just had his other problems. I want somebody that wants to be all in, and I want someone young and hungry. That's what I want. And I say young, like Clark Lee's 42, 43 years old. So Mike Elko, I don't know how old he is, but someone who's hungry. Show me that you're hungry to be here. And that's the number one trait that I want. Everything else will take care of itself. This state will take care of you if you prove that you're hungry and you're wanting to go after a national title. That's number one. If the candidates in no specific order, listen, I wanted Lane years ago, but that's neither here nor there. Drinkowitz, Lane, Golish for me. I mean, I would personally call Brent Key. Here's one that's off the just out of beaten path. I've told people this on our show. I would call Fran Brown, and I love Fran Brown. I would, if my son were a recruit right now, we would actively be talking to Syracuse because how much I love Fran Brown. And I think that would be the coaches that I would go after. I do think that Eli, Lane, and potentially, oh, this is gonna kill me. Potentially Alex Golish, but it's the truth. I think those will be the 3 guys they talk to first and see what's happening.
What's interesting about Lane, and I could be off on this, is signing day is December 3rd. Okay. Right
Mhm.
now, LSU sits just outside the top 10 in recruiting rankings, and they have 16 players committed. 10 of those guys are ranked inside the top 250. It's impressive. All right. Another 10 of those guys are from Louisiana. And the thing about LSU, that's a distinct advantage. And one of the reasons that people like the job is because it's never really been about the coach. You know, a lot of
Mm,
people, if they want to go to LSU, they want to go to LSU. And that's just kind of the way that it goes.
right.
Conference championships are not till December 6th. Transfer portals from January 2nd to January 16th. You look at Ole Miss, their schedule, what they have remaining, everything's behind them. And at the same time, everything's in front of them. What I mean by that is that they have a clear path to the college football playoffs. And if they take care of business, that makes any type of negotiation with LSU or Florida very difficult. And it
Yes.
also answers the same question that I believe Lane is trying to answer himself. Can I win a championship here in Oxford? And he's going to find out that this year. So that's the Lane part is very difficult. And if he left Ole Miss, regardless, there would be bad blood. If he left Ole Miss
For
in the middle of a
LSU.
playoff run where they are right now, I mean, holy smokes. And given the way that this year has turned out, I wouldn't be shocked. Vegas has Joe Brady at 2-1. I love the idea of Joe Brady. I don't think it's realistic, given the
I
fact
don't
that
either.
he's the OC of the Buffalo Bills for one of the hottest quarterbacks that we've seen play in the last 10 years. And he's already on the short list for a bunch of NFL jobs, right? And if he wanted to come back to college, he would have had that opportunity a while ago. James Franklin's on this list, 6-1. Not a candidate, in my opinion. Don't think
He's
they'll
not.
entertain it.
Yep.
Drinkwitz is so swaggy and arrogant and confident and all those things and has the offense. He's done an unbelievable job at Missouri. I don't know where he's at in terms of, looking for a better job. I mean, I think they'll build a statue of him in Columbia at this rate. So that's another one. Then you're left with Jeff Brom at Louisville, who to me, hey,
Football
listen, that's
guy.
one of those things, man. Like it's kind of like the Dan Mullen argument. Hey, I get Dan Mullen really struggled from a talent acquisition standpoint. He can coach. He can coach ball. So if you have that other side set up with an Austin Thomas and the way that they're structured and you feel aligned there, okay, I can get on board with that. Brent Key, I love. The other thing I love about Brent Key, I love culturally. I love the way they play. I love the way they run the football. The Haynes King thing, kind of makes me nervous a little bit, just
And
in
me
terms
too.
of a passer, right? They're so effective,
Me
they
too.
win, whatever. But you just kind of wonder, all right, like offensively, can we adjust in this conference and what does that look like? Clark Lee, love him. I think he'd be unbelievable. Not leaving, my opinion.
Me
Um,
too.
the
Agree.
name that we did not talk about that I think checks all your boxes, if we can get past all the Louisiana stuff, is Summerall. Listen, John Summerall was my neighbor back in New Orleans in his first stint with Tulane.
Okay.
This dude is a dude, not because he was my neighbor, but because I've gotten to know him and I like the way that he's wired. I don't think he backs down from a challenge. I think he's got some stuff in his neck. I think he's always looking to really kind of find that next challenge. He didn't take the North Carolina job last year when it was offered to him. I love the job that he's done with Tulane. Willie Fritz deserves all the credit for the foundation. But if you're looking for a foam at your mouth competitor and a guy with a chip on his shoulder that
Mhm.
believes he should be representing the flagship school in Louisiana, John Summerall would tell you that to his face that he is the best person for that job. And
God.
that type of stuff is hard to pass up. Now, here's the thing. For Scott Woodward, if he were to remain, it's the best of both world situations because you have a first-time Power 4 head coach that is going to have to lean on an experienced athletic director to say, hey, I need you. Who's the best DC out there? Okay? Should we keep Corey Raymond? Should we entertain keeping Blake? What does continuity look like with another year in the system, right? Can we continue to get the personnel that we need? There are obvious pluses there, and I will say this. The big brother, little brother syndrome that exists in Louisiana is so stupid. We
It
never hire
is.
a coach from Tulane. We never hire a coach from Louisiana Lafayette. Why do you think you are where you are? And I'm not saying that Billy Napier was ever the answer, but like you have to have an open mind to this. And I will give credit where credit is due. At least from what I have seen, the temperature on receiving a guy like John Summerall is so much more open than I ever thought it would be.
Oh, it is. Listen, hold on. Just so we're understanding, I hope I've articulated this well. I would take John Summerall.
Right.
Okay? Listen, I've been in a place that before I got into podcasting media where I work in those same buildings as people that I think that are going to make this decision. That's what my career was. I just don't politically think it happens. I am a man, and I have been wrong on a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to continue to be wrong, and I can be wrong. I really worried that they won't even truly entertain it only because of the political stuff that's behind this. They might tell me to go kick rocks in my opinions, and I'm an idiot. I hope they tell me that I'm an idiot. I do think he checks all those boxes. I think you're 1,000% correct here on that. He would kill it here. Now, does he want to take that Auburn job? If Auburn opens up, would that be as an Alabama guy? Would he take that over LSU? I don't know, but I do think he'd kill it at LSU. I worry about the political side of these things getting involved and why it wouldn't happen.
He would get that Auburn job, in my opinion.
I agree. They want him. Have you seen? I mean, if you look at Twitter, I mean, they're basically calling for this now. I mean, like he would definitely get it. And being a North Alabama guy, I think that's what he is. I know he's from Alabama, but I think he's from North Alabama. I mean, it would make sense there in reference to that. I think he would kill it at LSU. But Coop, I'm gonna have look. I have been proven wrong. I will continue. I got to see them politically LSU wise get over that hump because I don't think the governor will do that.
All right, let's end it here. Where does this end? What's your prediction?
I think they're gonna give it a shot at Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, or I think they go goalish. That's where I think that they go. I think that there's a very strong chance that two of those three tell you no.
I think Kiffin, in my opinion, depending on how the next couple weeks shake out, because that's going to dictate his whole situation there. If he does leave for a job, I know he has a I don't want to say an infatuation. I know he thinks of LSU highly.
You know what he thinks about Louisiana people highly. Look at his staff.
And the other part is, but here's where I look at Lane Kiffin. The last thing I'll say on this. I think he looks at the Georgia game this year, and he looks at the fourth quarter, and he looks up at giving up 17 points. And if you were to look at those two teams and say, how were they different? The biggest difference is the depth that Georgia has at every level of their defense, especially in the trenches. And if you play Ole Miss, what's the biggest thing that continues to come up? It came up this past weekend against Oklahoma.
Right.
It's the trench depth. The front line is actually good. You got Will Eccles, you got Xavier Harris, Monmi Ellen, Suntarine Perkins. But if those guys get north of 50 snaps, things get a little crazy, right?
Yep.
So he's been threading the needle year in and year out. This is very difficult. I think he knows this. I think us on the outside, most of us are numb to it. He's been threading the needle in terms of the job that their scouting department has done at Ole Miss. They've been one of the best in the country in terms of the volume of transfers that they are taking and hitting on. It's insane. And it's really not sustainable. So if you look at Florida and LSU, the access to bigger bodies, both in Louisiana and in the state of Florida, solves that problem both in the short term and the long term. It gives you a little bit of relief. And I know a lot of people are going to talk about the money. The money is going to be a big part of that. But from a football personnel standpoint, I can see a world where he says, hey, it just makes more sense year after year to be able to compete at the level that everybody expects us now to compete at Ole Miss if I had access to the bigger bodies that I know I can get out of high school. And, they've done a good job. It's the depth thing. And guess what? LSU had done a great job on the defensive line. Florida has done a nice job on the defensive line, right? But the access to those big bodies, I think that's important. So my guess here is that they're going to take the monster swing at Kiffin, and I have no idea what he's going to do. It
I
wouldn't shock me if he stayed. It wouldn't shock me if he went to Florida. It wouldn't shock me if it ended up at LSU. And quite honestly, if I had to pick between the three right now, it'd probably be Ole Miss or LSU.
I agree with that. And look, here's another truth that I know that his staff, and I'm sure you've heard these rumblings, they are tired of not being remotely close to getting guys like Tristan Keys. I mean that is the conversations I've had with people around there, and I'm just like, okay, well, I don't know if that problem happens at LSU, and I think that that's where they've gotten aggravated, from what I understand. So you could do it at Florida and LSU, but you're right on one thing that you hit that nobody wants to talk about. What if he goes to an SEC championship game? God forbid. What if he goes to the playoff? And what happens if he wins the first round and you're mid-December and you don't have a head coach?
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's literally the worst situation you could possibly be in
yeah,
if
and
you're anybody involved in that LSU staff.
no
You know?
doubt. Florida too, to an extent.
So, yeah, the Kiffin thing will be certainly interesting. And here's the thing. I actually think this ends up. I think it's either Kiffin or Summerall, in my opinion. I'm not saying that they don't entertain other options. I think as this process goes on, the guy 65, 70 miles down the road is going to start looking like a sexier and sexier option.
Very well could, and I would be all for it. Please don't get what I've been saying twisted. I would love him to be the next head coach here. Again, fearful.
No, I hear you. And I keep saying the last thing. I hope we see like a responsible contract and incentivize your coach to go out there, perform for 4 years and get the next one, just like A&M's done with Mike Elko. I don't know if that was their intention, but they got a guy on a $7.5, $8 million deal. Hey, they're 8-0 for the first time in how many years, right?
And they might
So,
win the SEC.
yeah,
They might win this whole thing.
it's going to be fascinating. Blake Ruffino from AOYS Sports, man. I appreciate you having on. You're only guest number 2 on Coop's Corner.
Oh,
And you
okay.
guys listening to Coop's Corner, make sure to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Coops Petagna. You can also follow me at Cooper Petagna. Blake Ruffino, you can find him on X at Blake J. Ruffino and at AYS Sports. Best in the business breaking down LSU football. Blake
Thank you.
Ruffino, I appreciate it. Guys, we'll see you next time.